Hello, it's good to see you all at Asiavision's Pacific NewsGroup webinar, featuring a fabulous news panel with Moderator Indra Singh from Fiji's FBC, Sincha Dimara, EMTV in Papua New Guinea, Gabriel Vusi Lai from VBTC Vanuatu, Stella Taoi from FijiTV, and Scott Waide, formerly of EMTV and now founder of LEKMAK. Their topic today: learning from the COVID-19 pandemic. The global health disaster that has closed borders, caused a health crisis in Fiji and Papua New Guinea, and an economic emergency across the Pacific. So how did your news gathering news output change? What were your innovations, and which ones will you keep in the future? We've got an hour or more to share our thoughts. Before handing over to the panel, it's my pleasure to introduce, for his words of welcome, the ABU Secretary General, Dr. Javed Mutagi.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and I welcome you all to the news group meeting for the Pacific Islands. It's good to see that Wendy initiated 2 meetings, one for the Pacific Islands and tomorrow for the Asia, but you are also participating in both events because of time frame. You know, we also good news that the topic of today is learning from the pandemic. We all learned several lessons from the pandemic. It has changed many things, including the way we live and the way we work. We learned to be innovative, as Wendy said, in our management, content production, and work hard in order to function in such a competitive situation. We also learned to be transparent, accountable, professional, and a trusted source of information for the Pacific, for the public. And we can only win the trust of the public when we are transparent, accountable, and accurate in reporting. We also learned to strengthen our partnership, and here is what ABU is all about, and ABU would be pleased to support you, has been supporting you, and will not hesitate to increase the support towards the Pacific Islanders. And thank you very much for joining this meeting, and over to you, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mutagi. Some excellent insights there. And now it's over to Moderator Indra and the panel: Sincha, Gabriel, Stella, and Scott.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Thank you very much, Dr. Javed, for those words. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the pandemic has changed many things. It's not only changed the way we live, it has not only changed the way we communicate with each other, be it family, be it professionally, or anywhere that we go. And more that why we have gathered here today, it has changed the face of journalism. I think for countries such as our friends in Papua New Guinea and in Fiji, with Stella and I here, it has taken us down the route where we never even dreamed about. In Fiji, I think previous to last April, and even prior to our second wave this year, everyone was watching it on TV screens and going, wow, this is happening in India, or wow, this is happening in Europe or in the States. And then boom, it hit Fiji in April. And as they say, the rest of the world knows. It's become something that has changed the lives, as I mentioned earlier on. But we'll talk more about that. And I thought everyone's got a great story to tell. What I'd like to do today is not only keep on yapping away and the panelists to keep on speaking, get everyone involved. I know there are some attendees as well. But first of all, thank you very much to ABU for this excellent idea of having the Pacific Forum today, because obviously the time difference and with news, etc., being produced tomorrow, but we'll definitely be there to support that as well. And also, thank you very much to Wendy and the team at Asiavision, who have worked tremendously hard from remote areas, I believe, and remote workstations and remote places to produce the AVN news on a daily basis for the members. Thank you very much for them. Without further ado, I'd also like to welcome the panel today. Some very, very interesting people in our panel, and starting off with Sincha Dimara, who's the head of news and current affairs for EMTV Papua New Guinea, a very reputable organization. And then next we have got Gabriel Vusi Lai, who's the chief of staff of VBTC Vanuatu. And then Stella, of course, Stella Taoi from Fiji Television, who's a senior reporter and presenter. And Scott Waide, who is well known around this part of the world for his great work. And we always have a lot of common things to talk about when it comes to mostly multimedia journalism, Scott. And I think it has, of course, taken off in our part of the world. And I think a lot of people are also following what you have been doing. So welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for taking our time to be here. And as we spoke about it, learning from the COVID-19 pandemic. What we'll do is open up the floor for each of the participants, starting from Sincha and Scott and Stella and Gabriel after that, just to talk a little bit about what they have experienced personally as we headed into from last year into this year and going towards the end of the year now. And this is basically something that will stay with us. So Sincha, I'll let you start.
Thank you, Indra, and thank you, Wendy and Dr. Javed and the panelists. So I'll just get straight into it. We, looking at it, we're learning from the pandemic, we're living the pandemic, we're reporting the pandemic, and we're having to deal with the pandemic. So for my team, actually, I have 28 staff, 6 out of the main city, 22 in the capital city. Now, we've gone through the first wave, we've gone through the second wave. When the pandemic hit last year, we were watching, we were reporting, like Indra, you said, we had the situation globally, we were reporting on it. We were imposing measures. We had a control center set up to deal through the government to deal with the pandemic and to give out the information. So we were following protocols, going through the control center to report what's happening. Now, fast forward. We went through the second wave early this year. Still reporting awareness. We have, so with our bulletin, we have a 1 hour bulletin, 6 p.m. live. We also live streaming our news. We have a midday bulletin, and we also had a COVID awareness program that was half an hour, 3 times a day. I think it was on a Friday, all of last year. Now, this year, we still have we've got a talk pandemic show, not supported by the government. This is all commercially driven for us. So all the awareness is out there. So we've been putting the awareness out there. We were having to deal with it ourselves. And the worst case scenario, just late last month, when we started seeing body bags. Now, so just to give us our stats, as of yesterday, 335 deaths. And now these are known deaths. Unknown, I'm talking to my reporters, listen out, get the information if you can, at your own, wherever you are, because this is a situation that we have to report, but we have to deal with it ourselves. So towards just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, sorry, we started seeing reports on social media. Now, social media for us is 2 things. It's either it can help us, or it is, there's fake news that we have to deal with, conspiracy theories that we have to deal with. So we are in a situation where we want to report facts. We have to deal with information that's been channeled through social media. So I've been talking to my staff I've been saying to them, let's stick to one lane. Let us report facts, and let's keep the conversation going. So that's what we've been doing. Now, we started reporting the deaths. it was on social media that there were pictures of body bags. And now this is in a hotspot, a city, a town out of Port Moresby. Now I started talking to the people at the control center. If this, look, this is going out on social media. This is not mainstream. We need to know. We need to get out there ourselves. We arranged that. So the mainstream media had to go to Goroka. This is in the Eastern Highlands province, to report on the situation, talk to authorities there. Now there was a problem there because now the mainstream media were on the ground. The health officials, it became a situation for them whether they tell us what's happening. Are we able to be at the hospital? Should they take the media in? We wanted that information. We wanted to show the viewers that, or we wanted to report on it. We wanted to show this because social media was reporting it, not mainstream media, because we wanted clarification from the authorities. We wanted to show. So we were there. It was a few days. They were actually supposed to be there for just one day. It turned out 2 days because there was conversation going back and forth, negotiation. Should the media go in? Eventually they did. Then we started reporting. Then we started showing the body bags. Then we, so that was the situation. Well, right after that, this is a hotspot outside of the capital city. Back to the capital city, same thing happening. The main hospital was struggling. We were able to get reporters in and show the situation. I kept saying, let's stick to it. We also had to win the trust of the health authorities in the hospital, because initially it was, they were not talking to us. Now, we had to get the message to them that letting us show the public what's happening is also helping you. So that's how we were able to get into the hospital, talk to the authorities, show it in pictures. That this is what's happening. Then we realized that we had to protect ourselves as well. So what the company did last week, we got everybody tested, and those who were positive or showed symptoms were told to stay home. Now we were all told to deal with this in a way that a scale down stuff. So I'm dealing with it right now. So as of Monday, we have scaled down. I have one team working. This is for a 2-week period, so that we want to see transmission. We are able, if there's any transmission of the virus, we are able to identify it straight away. So I have 2 teams right now. For this week, I have one team working. One team working from home. I've said to them, the only way you can help us is keep monitoring, keep giving me information if I need it, because you will be on your phones. So I have one team away from the office and one team here in the office now working. So I guess our main issues right now is vaccination, because we are very low on vaccination. And while that is happening, there's situations now where companies are imposing. We do not have, the government has not issued mandatory vaccination. So right now it's each companies having to impose their health and safety measures for their staff. Now,
interesting, Sincha. I'll just cut in for a moment there. It comes back to what we experienced in Fiji, and I'd like to hear from Stella as well a little bit later, and Scott. In Fiji at FBC, we had about 30 staff, and at one point in time, the entire newsroom was empty because we had the entire newsroom either down with COVID or the staff who are direct contacts. So have you, or are you planned and prepared for this, maybe heading into, we will talk a little bit about that when I come back, just keeping time into considerations.
Sorry, okay.
Just quickly, we go to Scott. Scott, you've been around and I've been seeing your stuff. What's your take at the moment on what we're going through, Scott?
Sorry, Indra, I'm just trying to get this Zoom thing working. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Scott.
Okay. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's come out of this is that it's touched news teams both professionally and personally. Like as Sincha said, because my exit was just a few weeks ago, so I'll be speaking from a point of transition in between. So from the EMTV side, when I was before I left, it was a huge impact on both the team as well, the team as a whole, and their families as well, because we had to deal with COVID on both fronts, in the house and at the office. So it affected us in a huge way. For us in Ley, it was the solution. Now, how do we work with very limited resources from within multiple media organizations and bring all that together? So that was the biggest challenge, trying to get everybody to see that we need to work together as a unit instead of individual organizations. And in the last few weeks, like I've just been to Port Moresby and I've come back and I'm about to head off to Port Moresby again. Now, I've been told to get tested because someone who was in a workshop that we were in, where I was running, has tested positive. So I've got to get tested either today or tomorrow. And I'm not showing any symptoms, but it's that kind of impact that it's had on both work and homes as well. And last week when I was in Bedang, my wife said, "Look, you need to get tested before you come into the house." Those kind of ultimatums. It's affected whole families. It's affected whole newsrooms, and I guess the biggest takeout from me from this COVID thing is that collaborations need to happen. It's a must that collaborations need to happen across media organizations in the Pacific.
Stella, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Wendy. Bulavinaka Noy, and a warm Pacific welcome to all of you who are joining us virtually this afternoon. So learning from the COVID-19 pandemic, who would have thought that a virus would bring so much restrictions? Today, I'll be focusing on Fiji One News experience on the second wave of the pandemic that hit Fiji and the lessons learned from this experience. Firstly, I would like to take you through the whole process inside the FijiTV newsroom when the second wave had hit Fiji in April this year. For us, the only situation we have always prepared for is the case of a natural disaster. And during this situation, our newsroom would switch into a standby mode with news crews on standby for 24 hours, ready to be deployed anywhere that needed covering. And we would run hourly bulletins to update members of the public on the situation on the ground. So the initial idea during the second wave was to do exactly that. But it is sad to say that we had totally mistaken. The pandemic compromised the process of news, and by this I mean that we wanted to produce news on the ground, but we had to keep in mind the safety of our news teams and the risk of contracting the virus. And at that time, the rate of infection in Fiji kept growing day by day, and today, I'm so grateful that none of my reporters were infected, have been infected till date. So the question that lingered in the newsroom was how we could get reliable news without compromising our reporters' safety. We managed to find a way through this by establishing bubble routines, allocating reporters, camera personnel and drivers into different bubbles that worked on specific hours in a 24-hour period. And because our main our main source of news came from government information. And here in Fiji, we had press conferences late in the afternoon going into the night. So we had emphasized manpower to that particular bubble. So during the peak of the second wave, this was somewhere around April to May. The second wave, we had containment zones set up, and due to our border restrictions, 4 of our staff, including our news manager, that live beyond these borders were relocated to an apartment near our headquarters. This carried on until a few months ago when the restrictions were lifted. So while Fiji was on a standstill, there was a spike in demand for news from the public. And even though we wanted to break news, we had to be sure that the news that we had was factual. We had social media blowing up, reporting fake news, and we were expected to keep getting up to date with information from what was transpiring on the ground. We encountered an incident where we were publicly reprimanded by our health ministry officers for covering a case here in the capital. This is because we visited an area of interest that had come to contact with the first community transmission case. This was the first case in Suva, and we thought we had taken extra precautionary measures from our end to get the latest news, and it was still seen as a breach. So from this, we had to go back and relook at other strategies to obtain news. The only other way was to get information from social media, which was a risk obtaining any type of information sent from the public, which we all know would compromise the quality of news as audio and video is concerned. And at that time, we relied heavily on press releases. We started a new way of conducting interviews where we would send out questions to our talents and ask them to send us a video of themselves on their phones and send it through whatever social media platform they would prefer. We also use telephone recordings and online Zoom session recordings. And while our picture quality was compromised, we made sure that our aim was to get the important news across. And as long as the audio is intact, we had actual information, factual information, we would run with that news. So for us, a big lesson learned here is proper planning and knowing your disaster. We had our teams, we had set out 2 bubbles and we treated it like it was a natural disaster, but not all disasters are the same. The changes that we will keep moving forward is making use of technology to pass on information. If there is no other way, we'd like to keep our quality, our sound and our video up to standard. But if there is no other way to get across, we'll use talents to send us information and videos, but that will only happen if we have no other options available. And I know that there's still a lot to learn from this pandemic as it is ongoing. We're not so far we still have the number of our death toll is it's slow, but we still have people dying from COVID. And I know that there's that this mode of engagement, that we will keep improving ways in which we organize our news. So that's an update from our news team. We were fortunate enough to be safe from this pandemic. We had strict bubbles. Our routine, no one was breached, and we are grateful that none of our team had contacted the COVID-19. That's all from Fiji One News. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. I think interesting input there. Something that I'm going to go back to Sincha and Scotty and Stella about is a lot of people talk about the public getting affected, and totally we sympathize with them. We sympathize with our population, of our populace, and everything that the authorities are doing. One thing that I picked up is from all 3, and including ourselves and the experience of others, is that a lot of times people forgot about journalists because we are out there reporting. We were out there trying to get the information across to people We are out there risking our lives, as you said, Stella. Sometimes maybe even wrong decisions were made, but we learned from it because no one had forecast what was going to happen. So maybe Sincha, starting from you, what mental impact has this had on the staff that you have? Maybe quickly in about 2 minutes, what was the mental issues that you faced with your staff? Because this is something new for all of us, Sincha.
Okay. So Indra, that's a very important point. I started thinking about it when we were reporting about frontline workers. We kept talking about frontline workers, the health system, the doctors, the nurses, but we forgot that we were affected too. And we were the ones that were linked to the people and the government and everyone else with the information. People want that information. So it became, you know, I started seeing that we really need to deal with it. So this is how we were dealing with it. We would try and get the conversation away from COVID, speak, you know, to each other, and we would go late into the night. We are talking about the pandemic, but we are reporting. But let's try put it on the side and talk about something else, just to be like a family, having conversations that apart from COVID, how you doing? You know, are you so much that, you know, we're reporting about that. We are in this war zone. How do you deal with it? You know, I'm, you know, so there, everybody's discussing, everybody's having a conversation, trying, you know, some even, you know, I stick to my faith, I say my prayer, that kind of thing, you know, just to get away from feeling so, you know, the emotions were high, but we had to try and deal with it. We're still dealing with it that way, Indra.
Definitely, and I think Stella, maybe I jump to you quickly. I know you've got a pretty much a young journalist just like us, and a lot of Fijian media fraternity. They're very much young people. How hard was it to get that mind frame and the mindset going? Because it was too easy, and it still is, to get people to break down or to lose hope, and going and seeing bodies, like Sincha mentioned, going to see bodies and going to see people dying or dead. How was it at FijiTV?
Thank you, Indra. For us, for me personally, I just given birth right before the second wave, and returning to work from my maternity leave, leaving my young baby behind, and going out to report. I had reported on this. During the peak, there was a missing body out at the morgue, and so I had to go back and do a story on report on that, going to the family members. And at that moment, emotions are really high. We had the lockdown, and you know, going out to the field, not sure whether you might be contacting the virus, because at that time our transmission rate in Fiji was very high, so that in itself was a roller coaster of emotion for me. For my team, with our news manager, we had, as I had mentioned earlier, 4 of our staff had to leave their families behind and come and relocate next door, an apartment closer to us. They had to leave their families behind. So when we are reporting, we're keeping in mind our family members and our children back at home. And till now, still, it's not a very difficult topic to discuss. We are usually the ones that are reporting, but when you look back and you think of the challenges that you face in traveling, coming to work every day to report and provide news for the nation, I believe that it's not an easy task. And I've seen some of my staff breaking down in the office. Even our news anchor Vili, he was a bit emotional, reporting on the daily death tolls, that we had recorded. So yes, like Sincha had mentioned, it's not an easy task, and it was a roller coaster of emotion. But I believe that for us, even I, like Sincha, have we just look back to our family, who is a pillar of strength, and our faith.
Thank you, Stella. I think the people of the world must have not realized what the Pacific journalists have been going through to do that. So before I get to Gabriel, welcome, Gabriel. I know you on the show. Thank you for joining us. I'll just quickly go to Scott. Scott, just in about 2 minutes or less than that, what's your take and knowing your experience in having covered some of the big events in and around PNG in the region on this, that people sort of didn't really think about what journalists were going through, but everybody else?
Yeah, thank you, Indra. That's a crucial point that needs to be brought up. And a lot of people kept referring to frontline workers and journalists. Journalists are frontline workers. And in the initial stages, when we had, I think it was four or six of our MTV staff, they had to be isolated because the main national control center was shut down, and staff had to be isolated. I found myself, being put in a role where I had to counsel people on WhatsApp, because people were staff was so distraught and concerned about the impact that it would have on their families and the stigma that was associated or is still associated with COVID-19. So it was they had to deal with it on, again, within the profession, within their own professional circles, and then going home, and their families also asking about COVID-19 and if they should get tested. So there was a huge amount of pressure on the staff, especially the young women who had families at home, new babies. So I found myself, talking to staff from 6 o'clock in the afternoon to 10 o'clock, then to 11 o'clock. And, sometimes they'll message me at 3 a.m. in the morning, just expressing a concern about what should I do. And it's very, very basic emotional, human emotional needs that you have to tend to as team leaders. So it gave me a whole new perspective on what we were doing and how we were dealing with COVID-19 and a national disaster of this scale, because it's rewriting the manual for dealing with national emergencies and disaster reporting, because dealing with a scenario externally and then being immersed in that disaster and reporting on it as well is a whole different animal to deal with.
Definitely, Scott. And before I get to Gabriel, I think something we might touch a little bit later on, it's getting interesting, is how this impact of working late, and like Stella said, in a newborn baby, and Scotty mentioned, how on the domestic front there were some issues as well. We'll try and touch on that a little bit later. But Gabriel Vusi, thank you for joining us. Welcome to this panel from VBTC, our friends from Vanuatu. Now, I know Vanuatu has not, and they are lucky that they have not faced what maybe Fiji and PNG is, but what has been the learnings for VBTC and Vanuatu media as a whole from this COVID-19 pandemic, Gabriel?
Thank you very much, Moderator. Apology for coming late. I just had my midday bulletin and hosting a talk back, so I just came in. Anyway, in Vanuatu, we just do our news as normal. Our status is COVID-free. However, we just received 2 cases who are still now in quarantine from Numean, and the authorities have sent the test to Australia to verify whether it is the Delta variant or not. However, we chase our news on the road and in offices as usual. And I'm keen to learn a lot from my colleagues in Fiji who have went a lot, and we sympathize with them for some journalists who have lost their lives in this pandemic. Yeah, so that's what we are doing right now in Vanuatu. We just done normal, and we learn a lot from our neighboring countries like New Caledonia, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and we learn from them. And if we have a community outbreak, how we will conduct ourselves in terms of running the news, because people in Vanuatu still need to know what is going on in Vanuatu. And during this pandemic in Vanuatu, and social media is one of the many speculations speculated in that platform. However, I learned in Vanuatu that whatever the conversation going on in social media, they are waiting for the last final words from the VBTC, and that's creates our advantage. We're using this pandemic as our advantage, despite the social media they speculate around, but they still trust the mainstream media. So we have journalists here, and also we have plans how we can conduct ourselves. Maybe we can scale down the numbers of our news staffs, particularly to send home the female staffs because they have kids to look after if the COVID-19 hit our communities.
Thank you, Gabriel. I think Vanuatu, we're so happy to hear that one of our countries in the, well, Vanuatu is one of those countries in our region that hasn't been impacted directly by COVID. So Gabriel, we're wishing that it stays that way. Now, you touched on something very important. You said that social media and the Vanuatu brothers and sisters, they always will wait for the final news from VBTC and the like. Now, I go to Stella. Stella, in Fiji, it's sort of totally different nowadays because media in Fiji is branded as something else and everyone sort of goes on social media. What is the challenge that in present for you to handle as one of the heads of the newsroom on a daily basis? Because you and I both know if it comes on social media, they take it as gospel truth. If it comes from media, you are always stigmatized for one reason or the other.
Yes, Indra. So the challenge here for us is trying to not only break the news, but get verified information. Usually people just take a video and put it up and people take it as the gospel, as you had mentioned. And while we wait and get our sources verified, information from relevant authorities like police and the Ministry of Health, and that takes a while and some time. And we cannot just run information that we see on social media and put it up on our bulletins. So that is a major challenge, and we're trying our best to work with major stakeholders to ensure that our information, the information that is given is provided to us on ease and when basis. But here in Fiji, we seem to be, I wouldn't want to say we're fighting a losing battle, but the real challenge is social media, the leaking of information and putting up information that are not verified. And so when we receive calls from the public, getting the information verified is another challenge for us, because there are so many barriers that we have to, people that we need to get information from, and when they do not respond on time, that is another challenge. So yes, but we try our best to continue to provide news at the latest for the public.
Yeah, thanks, Stella. Now, I know you said something very interesting to the fellow panelists and those who are attending. In Fiji, when the first wave rather happened last year, we had the details of the patients leaked out on social media from within the health ministry, and it was there for everyone to see. You would know where they're from, what's their age, what's their name, etc. Now the public picked up on that, and they bombarded the traditional media for saying we're not doing our job. Now, Sincha, what is it like in PNG at the moment? Because we in the Pacific and anywhere around the world, we have to wait for government verification, health ministry verification, etc. what's it like? Have you faced anything as such, or your team as such, on in terms of social media impact during this COVID crisis?
So Indra, as I mentioned earlier, with what happened in the last 2 weeks, when we started seeing body bags, that was first out on social media. Now we had to get the government authorities to tell us, to verify this. It was out, it was being shared on social media, and yet all the mainstream media could not, because the authorities were not speaking. That is how we were able to get to them and organize for the mainstream media to be at this hotspot to show the situation, and that's what we did. Now, also, this is what I've been working with my staff. If there's information out there on social media and we need to verify, this is what we do. So a couple of the reporters all have contacts to authorities, but there will be certain people that, it will take time given verifying the information. So what we do is I talk to my contacts, two other reporters talk to their contact. We are pushing we're pushing for them to tell us, give us the information. And that is how we force them to talk. And as I was saying earlier, that the hospital in the capital city, we were able to get the trust of the hospital, the head of the hospital, because our message to him was, if you help us, if you show us, if you take us in there, and we show what's happening, it will also help you with your job, that people will see what is happening. The truth is there. So that's how we dealt with it. We were able to utilize all our contacts. Everybody had their contacts to be able to converse and get the story out. That's how we were dealing with it, yeah.
Definitely, thanks, Sincha. Now, I know that there's quite a number of attendees. Please do feel free to shoot in your questions if you want anything answered. Or it's not necessarily questions. You can also give your input, and we're more than welcome that. Now, Scott, you have been very much of a mobile journalism personnel, and I've known that from you very first time that I met you, that you very much, and you wanted this to start in this part of the world, in the Pacific region. Now, this came in very handy during this pandemic, and it's going back to Stella, where citizens journalism helped us, and Sincha as well. Citizens journalism helped us, and it has come to where mobile journalism has sort of been a strength for journalists and media as a whole to cover this pandemic.
Yes, Indra, as Stella said, it's forced us to also accelerate the use of mobile journalism in the Pacific, and especially in Papua New Guinea. We've, for me personally, I've asked people to record what they're seeing, and record what you're seeing around you. Don't talk about things that you don't know, assumptions. As long as you're seeing a hospital being shut down or being closed and patients being turned away because of COVID-19, or because you're seeing body bags, or because you went to a hospital and the hospital authorities didn't want to talk to you, those are the stories that we want to hear. Just talk about what you're seeing, because that forms just part of a bigger story, and that's been very effective for us. Trying to get the stories out and collecting pieces of that large story puzzle. And for the case that Sincha talked about in Goroka, where there were pictures of body bags being circulating, it's trying to get the authorities to talk about an issue like that has been really difficult. And just yesterday, I was talking to a group of journalists here in Leh on WhatsApp because the chief executive of the hospital here has been playing hide and seek with the media. So I said, look, why don't you all just get to the hospital, because there was a press conference about some of the, those wonderful ribbon cutting stories that they like to do. So I said, just go there, hijack the event and talk to him. As soon as they got there, they wanted to talk about COVID-19. The guy bolted. So it's situations like this that we have to contend with, and just basically turn the tables on them. Disrupt the nice events that they're having and try to get the answers. And we find that it's increasingly coming to that stage where we have to, force doorstop interviews to happen, force press conferences and authorities to talk about COVID-19. Because even if we wanted to force a virtual event to happen, a virtual press conference, authorities wouldn't talk to us. So yes, at one level, building trust, and at the other level, it's like you have to talk to us. You have to make it happen. And again, one of the things is that the audience doesn't care about the health and welfare of journalists. They will demand that you go out there and get the story. So you have to also deal with the pressures coming from the public as well, because the public thinks that we're basically a team of Avengers, there to battle COVID-19. So it's educating the public as well about the roles and the dangers that we are facing, and it also helps if we project that level of transparency, like telling them we could get this story because we face these obstacles. And they appreciate that level of transparency when I'm talking about that, the difficulties that we're facing. One more thing, Indra, is that as journalists and members of the media, I'm talking about journalists, content producers, cameramen, everyone involved in the media. When you're in the media space, you're in a position of authority, and that means that extension of COVID-19 work has to be done outside the 9 to 7, 9 to 6, confines, and you have to go to your community and talk to them as well. And that's increasingly, that's what I've been finding myself doing, because you can say something on the news, say something on social media, but when you go home, there'll be people coming to your home or calling you, texting you, asking, can you explain what happened on the news today? So that extension of going into the communities and at least having, small group sessions is really, really crucial in terms of extending that reporting and coverage.
Definitely, Scotty. I think you touched on a very important point. I think, Gabriel, back to you. Very interesting, as you mentioned, Vanuatu, apart from cases in quarantine, there hasn't really been much to report about on COVID. By the way, Scotty, thank you very much for holding up the camera and being part of the group. Really appreciate that. So, Gabriel, but just watching all this international news, watching Fiji and PNG and the likes in this part of the world, Australia and New Zealand go through this, what's the feeling amongst the journalists in terms of just seeing this? Because we talked about this before, that when we saw it on the television screens previously, we were like, whoa, this is happening around the world. But it's happening in our country now. For our colleagues in Vanuatu, what's the feeling like with the journalists? Are they ready for something if it happens, or is still there a bit of scariness that they are scared about what might happen if it happens here? Gabriel?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, of course. We all human beings. We fear a lot, and when we see the experiences, our neighbor countries like Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Solomon Islands are going through, it brings a lot of worries to us on what happened if the COVID-19 arrived at our source. So yes, it's scary. However, we still maintain our position that our role is important to disseminate information to public, and that's why we stand our position that whatever comes, we have a plan how we can conduct ourselves. Even we can scale down the numbers of our journalism and send some homes, and then some will be sleeping. In the workplace, and we'll continue to provide services. And as we speak, as we have 2 cases in the country right now in the quarantine facilities, the people are quite a bit nervous of what the results may be at the moment, because we're still waiting for the Australia to confirm whether we have the Delta variant, and that's the big worry at the moment. And as we speak, the office of the Prime Minister closed, and the Public Service Commission also have issued and cellular for all the departments that they can add in, they can show the vaccination card before they can allow into the premises. So yes, of course, the public fear, having the fearing at the moment.
Definitely, Gabriel. Now, look, you said about vaccination. Now, in Fiji, it is no jab, no job, for those of you who might know it. So it's either you get jab or you don't have a job. And I think the stance by government has sort of worked, whereby we are almost 98% on first jabs, almost hitting 90% for second jabs. Our tourism industry is opening up on the 11th of November. Fiji is going to start welcoming tourists from Australia from December 1st. Almost the last we checked is over 45,000 bookings just for December itself. Now, for my newsroom, what was very interesting is that no one was anti-vax. Every journalist and our company as a whole, almost 99% of the people were fully ready to get double jabbed and continue, because they were protecting not only themselves, their colleagues, keeping their jobs and everything. For the newsroom, it's 100% double jab now as well. Let's go to PNG. I know, Sincha, you mentioned that the vaccination is not as high, and I believe it's not compulsory as well. But how's the newsroom feeling? Like, are they ready? Have they got jabbed, or are they? There's some hesitancy, because there's a lot of anti-vaxxers around the world who are trying to brainwash people as well, and we've seen that firsthand in Fiji. But what's it like for your newsroom in terms of getting that jab to save some lives?
Oh, Indra, that's interesting, because it's a struggle for me now, because most of the staff are not haven't been vaccinated. So I tried to talk to them, trying to find out why we are reporting on this. We've done awareness on this. How do they, vaccination for them? For most of them, I guess when I spoke to them, it's more believing in the immune system, the first defense. But see, we've had this discussion. There will come a time when we will be like Fiji, no jab, no job. We may be heading that way, and if it's mandatory, then we will have to deal with it that way. For example, the governor of the city, right now, to go to his conferences, you got to show your vaccination green card. And that became an issue yesterday when there was a conference. I had to find somebody that was vaccinated to go for the conference. And so when we had the discussion, and when I was asked if no jab, no job is imposed, I said, well, we're going to deal with it. You might find yourself without a job. Yeah. So that is for me and my staff at this stage.
Stella, with you, and I believe we are almost on the same page in Fiji, whereby almost all journalists have got that. Just quickly, maybe less than a minute, what's it been like in terms of support for that vaccination for the newsroom at FijiTV?
For us, Indra, we're on the same page. We are fully vaccinated. We even had a team coming over from the Ministry of Health to come and get our team vaccinated. I guess I was one of those last lots to get vaccinated, because I had just recently given birth. But then we also made it, since we were reporting the news, it was our responsibility to also get vaccinated. And we are also grateful that we did not have to let any of our staff go because of because of their beliefs, or because they did not want to get vaccinated. Everyone, including our general manager and in the company, is fully vaccinated as of now.
Well, that's great news. Now, thank you. I think Nisha has got a question where she is asking about being a senior staff. How did you keep positive drive going among the juniors? Thanks for that. I know Sincha touched on that, sitting in late and trying not to talk about it. I believe, Sincha, it was you who were talking about the staff numbers. Yeah, that was a great one. I can, So with FBC, it was the same thing. Trying to have a little joking sessions from here and there, breaking up the bubble, doing video conferences, etc. I think just kept the mood going, which we also had bubbles and all that happening at that point in time. Now, Scott, you are known to be out in the community a lot, and you meet a lot of your people out of the community. What's the take on, also including journalists and the people, in terms of getting the jab?
Yeah, it's for us. It's really difficult to convince people to go and get vaccinated, and that's primarily because a lot of people are very skeptical of vaccination, and it's also because there's been a lot of negativity circulated on social media in the initial stages of COVID. So the amount of time the anti-vaxxers and the skeptics invested in pumping out social media videos and memes and all that has kind of paid off for them. So there's a lot more people believing that than the benefits of vaccination and the fact that it might just save your life if you need it. The vaccination numbers I've seen in Leh, where I live, have spiked after the number of dead bodies increased at the morgue. And I guess for Papua New Guinea, when people start seeing other people die and when they start seeing their relatives die, then the numbers will increase. It's an unfortunate reality that we face in this country. And just in the last week, like I've been to Port Moresby, Leh, and Medang, three centers, and every day when you drive along the streets, there's one funeral procession. There's an ambulance and a few cars taking a body to either from a morgue to the cemetery or from returning from a burial. So the number of deaths have noticeably increased, and that's prompted people to actually show up at vaccination centers. I showed up at a vaccination center like last week, and there was a whole heap of people just lining up to get Johnson & Johnson vaccinations. So it's while we still struggle with it, the vaccination numbers have risen very sharply over the last month.
Well, we all hope that people do take that on board. Now, in these trying times, there have been times when the superior management of individual companies come into play, and I'll share an experience with us at FBC. Our management, led by a CEO, spent thousands of dollars. I can't quote the exact figure right now, but thousands of dollars to ensure that our people were tested. The company put all the staff through testing. Also paid for the accommodation if they were to move into apartments, meal allowances, and those who were positive, we provided them with all the support and care that was needed. That went a long way in arousing that loyalty to the company, because they knew that we were giving to the company and the company was looking after us in these times. And going even to the part where some of the staff who were part-timers didn't have a job, our company is helping them in terms of ration supplies, etc. Now, Stella, I believe it is sort of similar with you guys as well, where the management did step in to assist. How important has it been to have management as such in times of struggles when the newsroom is trying to, or the company and newsroom in particular, trying to take out all the stories that's needed?
Thank you, Indra. For us, the company had stepped in to provide accommodation for our 4 reporters who lived outside of our border restriction areas, and they also provided them with allowance, food allowance, and but apart from that, we believe that because they were living away from their family members, we had to provide them with them and their families with ration packs because they had spent quite a few months away from their home. They spent around a month here in the office and 3 months out in the apartment. But from in terms of testing, we did not have our reporters were not because they were not in contact with any of those who have contracted transmitted the virus. The company did not spend on getting our reporters tested, but till date we're still fine, and our family members, the members of those who have also gone out to join their families, our 4 reporters who were in our hostel are now okay, and yeah, the support from management has been great so far. Thank you.
Since thank you, Stella. Since before I get to you with that, I also have a question. When particularly with PNG now, Fiji has had this with the deaths taking place. How has it been? Have the families been willing to give interviews? Have those who've been affected by COVID been willing to front cameras, etc.? So the first one is, of course, the support from a management team, senior management in this, and the second one that I've just asked, Sincha, if you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Okay, so Indra, reporting on these deaths, we see this is something that I am still trying to work out, where talking to people who have lost loved ones to COVID. Now, you know, we have to think about it. This is also culture will come into play, where, you know, families who've lost loved ones, will they be willing to talk? We haven't come to that stage yet. Will they be willing to give us a story? Will they be willing to say, you know, how COVID has affected them? We haven't got to that yet. I have been, you know, thinking about, because we are in the situation now, I have one team working and one team away. It is a topic that we want to I want to discuss with them, going to the people who have lost loved ones to COVID, bearing in mind culture, how will they respond? They've buried their loved ones. Are they willing to talk to us, to talk to us about the experience? So yeah, Indra, it's a topic that we are still in. Yeah, I still want to discuss it.
Definitely. And just quickly, maybe in 30 seconds or less, Sincha, how's the support been from the hierarchy to the news team amidst this COVID pandemic? What Stella and I were just talking about earlier on.
Okay, so we've come to the stage where we had to really, we've been having the management having meetings ad hoc because of the situation. So as I mentioned earlier, we got everyone tested last week. Those positive were not allowed to get to be in the office. And so I've lost 2 senior people, and I'm having to deal with, you know, everybody's job is important. Now I've lost 2. I've got to, for the next 2 weeks. So these measures that we put in place is for the next 2 weeks, where we scale down. We have one team work the first week and the next team work the second week. So towards the end of the second week is when we will assess the situation again. The ones who tested positive and have stayed away from the office, how do they get back into the workplace? So that we are still dealing with I'm still having meetings with the management.
Okay,
regarding this.
Okay, perfect. Now, Gabriel, I know you've got your head, Francis, who's a very experienced media personnel. Obviously, he would have all the plans in place should you go through what the other nations are going through, Gabriel.
Yeah, of course. This morning we have a briefing from our CEO, Francis Hammond, and he highlighted some of the steps that will be taken if the government announce that there will be lockdown, pending the the results if we have the variant in the country. And that's what Francis has asked this morning, as the whole group. And there is a plan that will follow as our superior will hand out who's going to stay in the premises and who's to work from home and so on. So that's what we are prepared at the moment.
Definitely, and I think we, the region who has been affected, can also help if any need arises, working together in the Pacific Islands. Scott, we've got a question here, and I think it'll be a good one to answer from you. Erwin asks, what impact has misinformation had on your attempts to effectively cover the pandemic and disseminate relevant information?
Yeah, Indra, it has had a tremendous impact on getting the right information out, because you have doctors on the fringes who are also spreading misinformation, and it's had a huge impact on PNG, so much so that I've just come back from Port Moresby from a fact-checking workshop from the International Fact-Checking Organization, and one of the key things that featured in that fact-checking workshop was COVID-19 misinformation and disinformation. So it's a massive problem, and for Papua New Guinea itself, that needs to be countered like very strenuously with fact-checking within media organizations. So yes, huge problems that we're facing. And as I said earlier, the investment that people have put into misinformation in the initial stages of COVID are just reaping the so-called benefit of people not responding positively to vaccinations, not taking COVID seriously. And there are many people who are still not taking COVID very seriously. And coming back to what Sincha said about talking to relatives, one of the challenges that we've also faced is whether relatives acknowledge that their loved one died of COVID. It's a huge challenge, trying to convince people, or at least get them to admit that this person died of COVID, because according to them, he was diabetic or she had a heart problem. They're saying the underlying, giving prominence to the underlying problems that their loved ones had. They will not accept that he died of COVID, because according to them, it's a conspiracy to drive up numbers and for the government to get funding.
I think we in Fiji as well have been going through that, where there's a lot of talk about conspiracy theories, etc. Now, something I mentioned earlier on, just going back to that, and Stella mentioned this, she just had given birth and was back. Now, from my newsroom, I know from experience and talking to a few of the reporters and journalists, they've gone through this, particularly the female journalists. Now, there was long hours, or there still is long hours involved. You'd have to stay at work for very late. Some had to move out of home, had to move into apartments and flats, staying away from partners and boyfriends and husbands and so forth. It created some domestic problems as well for these journalists, and that impacted their work. Now, let's start from you, Stella. From you, and then we'll go to Sincha, Scotty, and maybe Gabriel, you can add in a little bit as well later on, despite not being at that stage yet. But Stella, starting from you and then to Sincha, what have you seen? Because we know that this is happening now within media fraternity because of the, or we report on domestic issues, but it's happening in some of our own journalists.
Thank you, Indra. For us, we have not received any reports of domestic problems at home, but we've always advised our reporters, especially young women and our ladies in the newsroom, that they be able to tell us if we're open. Our doors are always open if they have issues with their spouse or their partners having a problem with them having to move away from home because of work. For us, we haven't had any issues of that sort, as most of our our teams have always reported that they had supportive families, and that we think is an important pillar of strength for each of our reporters, that their family members are supporting them during this time, this very busy period for reporters in the newsroom.
Sincha?
Okay, so Indra, with my news team, I talk to my reporters individually. Mainly the ones who have families, who are married and have families. If they were to go out to fly out of to leave their family and fly out to another province, I'm always mindful about how their family will take to deal with it. So I'll give an example. When I had to fly a journalist out of Port Moresby to this hotspot, I firstly had to ask the team who is willing to go. And so there was a show of hands, vaccinated, unvaccinated. I had to tell them that I'm sending somebody, but I'm sending somebody who's vaccinated. And then my reporter who was vaccinated that I sent had a family. So I had to deal with it like, so you will your family, is this okay? You have to talk to your family. Are you okay to travel? Everything we discussed. So the reporter went off. Now, I also said that, look, coming back, let's deal with it this way. Stay away from the office. Get tested, stay away from the office until you're sure you're fine, you can come back to work. So constant communication with reporters individually. I haven't had any issues so far. Yeah.
Scott, do you know of anything that's happened, and maybe after Gabriel quickly as well?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've found is that you can't just be a manager. You also have to be a counselor. So, and that means talking to your staff like on a very, very personal level. If you are, because COVID forced us to work very long hours, and in very unusual circumstances. So, like Sincha dealt with the Port Moresby team, I dealt with the lay team, but then after 6 o'clock, we were dealing with producing content as part of a collaboration. So that, it would start from 7 p.m. at night and then went onwards for until 10 p.m. at night. And the drop-offs would happen until, 12, 1 a.m. in the morning. So it put a lot of stresses on families as well, because especially for the young women who had young kids at home, you get a call from the husband or the partner saying, when are you coming home? It's not discussed openly, but you have to deal with it with some tact and diplomacy and some whole heap of understanding. So it just goes beyond the textbook approach of management and all that, because you need to deal with each case, or each person on a case by case basis. And I guess it forced us to develop a whole set of new skills on how to deal with COVID-19 as both, reporter, journalist, content producers, and managers. So I guess it's one benefit of dealing with a very new scenario.
Definitely, thank you. Gabriel, anything as such? Well, overall, I know you're not into the COVID thing yet, but just from your perspective as the head of the newsroom.
Yeah, thank you, Indra. At the moment, I know I will be one of them. If our superiors advise us some of us to stay in the premises, and I know I will be one of them who will be in the premises. And I already talked to my family and took them together and I talked to them that this is what they expect. And yeah, if it happens, then And I guess at the moment, Francis hadn't advised who will be the journalists that will remain in the premises and who will be work from home. And I guess if they know who they are, that will be in the newsroom, I guess they will talk to their family also. And however, in our briefing this morning, he advised us that all the females will be sent home because they have kids to look after, and he will keep the male journalists in the premises.
Definitely, and that's what I was saying. Sometimes you have to make some decisions that might cut your newsroom down. Now, it was a very emotional day for us at FBC when we had an empty newsroom. We produced news from home for about a week or so, and at the time we had a lot of my staff that had contracted either COVID or, as I mentioned earlier on, were exposed to it. So we had to end up operating from home. Now, there's a lot of pressure because you've got to ensure that the news still goes. Then you've got the sponsored news segments, etc. You have to look at all this. But in the midst of that, what you pick up is you learn new things. So what we learned new is, yes, we could do news from home. We needed a presenter who had to come into the studios and do it. The team that I had working had remote internet facilities, etc., provided for by the company, etc. Now, that worked out very well. It is now shown us that we need to plan ahead. Previously, we would have said it's not doable, let's not even think about it, etc. But now we have to think ahead and plan on this. Now, in any particular order, who wants to go first, whoever can go first, how has this changed Pacific journalism? Because in the past, if you said doing news from home, people would start saying CNN and BBC, etc. Now, when you say you do news from outside of the office, you're talking about EMTV, you're talking about FijiTV, you're talking about VBTC, you're talking about FBC and the like. So how has it changed in the way we manage and produce or plan for our newsroom or news production on a daily basis, guys? I open up the floor.
Okay, Indra, can I go first?
Sure, go ahead, Sincha.
Yeah, okay. So early this year, when we saw during the second wave, we started planning. Now we planned for a scenario where most of the staff will be down with COVID, and how do we deal with that when we have a bulletin to put to a studio setting? So we built a studio, a Plan B studio, sort of, where we can have less staff to put the bulletin. We did that early this year. Now we just in the last month, what we've seen, so we will bring that back again. But so the technical team, I've been speaking to them, and they're working on this. Where if anything, let's channel everything to one computer and be able to do everything from there. I mean, they're working on it. I even said to them, can my presenter present from home? They said to me, you're going too fast. We will work at it. But so this is it. We're still working on it, build a studio, work out ways where everybody will work remotely and everything is channeled to a certain spot where it can be, we will still be able to function. So
interesting you mentioned.
It's a work in progress.
Sure, Sincha. It's interesting what you mentioned, presenting news from outside, and our CEO and with the technical guys came up with a solution that we could have our presenter present news, who's Edwin, who's attending this. He could present from home, so with a live view, with a camera, with a setting of putting a pot plant or two, most probably. But news goes. So we're starting to think outside the box. Scott.
Yeah, Indra, it's rewritten the textbooks of human resource management, not just in the Pacific, but globally as well, and newsroom management. Like it's pushed the limits of technology, and what used to be consumer level technology has now become mainstream. And we're using video that is once in a previously we wouldn't even use. We're using bad quality video, but good quality audio. So we've done all that shift in a space of 2 years. And what was previously unacceptable, it's become acceptable, like very shaky user-generated content we're using now. How do you manage your human resource going into the future? Do we adopt a model where everybody works from home and saves costs, or do we still bring them to an office? I think the transition was already happening, and just kind of accelerated it to a point where it's become mainstream now. We were having this discussion previously about, how millennials like working in a space where they're comfortable with. COVID has showed us that maybe people should work from home, or for some people it's difficult to work from home. So yeah, it's rewritten a whole set of policies and textbooks, and triggered a whole set of academic research on this topic.
Thanks. Next, maybe Stella or Gabriel.
Yes, I agree with Scott. You put out that question, if you put up that question 2 years ago and you ask our management team if they're going to, if our reporters and our news presenter could work from home, the answer would be no. Because of COVID, we are now relying heavily on telephone recordings and online Zoom sessions for our news production. And we are open-minded to the fact that our reporters could work from home, given that they edit their stories, mobile journalism, use their phones to record and edit. But we still have, we will still need our presenter in studio. We haven't moved to the, we have not discussed on moving our presenter away from studio yet, but we are open-minded to the fact that there will be time that will come that just like how FBC was heavily affected, we are grateful that it did not happen to us, but there are plans in place, and this time we know that we'll be prepared for anything that will come our way. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. Gabriel?
Yeah, we already planned for all the journalists that will work from home, will send in their content or reports via Zoom. And like Stella said, the news presentation will be in the studio. So that's what our plan is. So hopefully that we pray that the COVID-19 will not reach our community.
Definitely, Gabriel, we pray that as well from what we have seen. Now, guys, I just realized we've been going for almost an hour and a half. We could go for another hour or two, Wendy, but I know everyone's got a news bulletin to take out this afternoon. So lastly, and Scott's been standing there, with his camera. So lastly, look, we talk about everyone, but as newsroom heads, who do we turn to? Like, we mentor, and Scott, you said a lot of good things about mentoring, apart from being a manager, etc. How does it affect you? How does it? I mean, look, I'll start off. It has impacted me. It's impacted my relationship with my fellow colleagues. It's impacted my relationship with my staff at home, etc. Because everything that you deal with, you're sort of a sponge from management, from staff, from outside, from within, and you're stuck in the middle to ensure that everything goes the right way. So that's something I'll maybe leave when I round up just after you guys have spoken. So lastly, Sincha, what do you think? Where do we turn to as newsroom heads?
Indra, that's I put the bulletin together. I go home and I think about it, and I say a prayer. I have my faith, and I talk to my staff. Like Scott said, you just have to live with it and deal with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Sincha.
So
Scotty?
I see my family once in a while. Yeah, I talk to my family too, but my family really is my my family really is my brothers, my nieces and nephews. I am on my own, but I talk to them, and then I talk to my staff. That's how I deal with it.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, you know, in the initial stages, I had a breakdown. I had to go and see my aunt and my uncle and just take it off. I had to talk to them about it because I was also a member of the COVID-19 planning committee in Leh, and we were planning worst case scenarios like what we're seeing now. And we were talking about body bags, and it had a huge impact on me. Like, I mean, reporting on it, fine. I can deal with that stress. I can deal with the stresses of dealing with my own staff. But yeah, like you said, who do I turn to? So I had to find a way to deal with it because, of course, in the Pacific, it's really difficult to get counseling services. And you know what many reporters are dealing with and many news heads are dealing with is post-traumatic stress disorder. And we, you know, as Pacific people, we don't deal with it like Westerners do. We deal with it by talking to our families and, you know, crying in front of our families, you know, our elders and whoever's willing to listen to us, and we get it out. Difficulty with reporters who are, you know, the eldest in the family, really difficult because you can't talk to your siblings about it, your younger siblings about it. You have to go and talk to somebody who's older than yourself. And like for my case now, I'm actually going to Port Moresby because my parents are there. Both of them are sick, so I have to go and deal with that as well. And my sister's dealing with it, but as the eldest, I have to go and deal with it as well. And it's happened at a time when, you know, COVID cases are at its peak. So you turn to that the family structure that has always provided your psychological backup and has done so for centuries. So it's going back to the roots and, you know, finding that support again.
Thanks, Scott. Stella?
For me, who do I turn to? I turn to my family. I have a great support system backing me since I returned to work, working long hours, 12 hours a day is not easy. And even though this difficult time this has been a very difficult time for journalists, not only in Fiji, but around the world. I believe that your background or your family members it could be a pillar of strength for you. And this COVID pandemic has also brought our newsroom together. We are more caring towards one another. We check in on each other. If you're not feeling well, we try and work as a team to sort out issues. And like our door is always open for counseling. And as managers, we step up and try and give the best advice that we can to our reporters. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. Gabriel, rounding it off with you.
Thank you, Indra. Yes, for the newsroom at the VBTC, we all had our two jobs, and but the challenge is that our kids doesn't. Who do we turn to? And I feel the colleagues who had experienced a lot, and I thank the opportunity that I can sit with you and learn so much from you guys in this meeting, and that could help shape me into the future. One of the challenges that I face is that my child is she depends on me. So if we separate the island, that's the challenge. My child depends on me, so that's the challenge, and I hope everything will be all right.
Thank you, Gabriel. You know, as I said earlier on, people around the world might not even know what Pacific journalists have gone through in the past year or so. Now, there are some countries that have been lucky in the region, but they've been affected. There's no tourism, there's no flights. The economy is struggling. And you have countries like Fiji and our colleagues in Papua New Guinea, brothers and sisters in Papua New Guinea have been struggling. It has been one of those rides that no one expected. And I think what we've heard here today, and we could go on for hours talking about this, what we've heard here today is resilience that I'm proud to say that the Pacific has. We can stand up to the challenge anyway in the world. I think too often that we've been looked down upon in terms of journalism quality in this part of the world. And Scotty and I spoke about this some years back at one of the conferences, I think. I think we have shown resilience. Yes, we have a long way to go in learning the ropes and getting better, but I think shown resilience. And I think it all goes down to the hardworking journalists in our newsroom who have made this possible. We are heads, we sit there, we dictate terms, we tell them what to do, we guide them. But it is them who have sacrificed on a daily basis to go out there and get the stories and get us the news and get the people of our individual countries the news. So I'd like to thank each and every journalist that's here right now as an attendee and those who are not here. Thank you very much for the work that you've put in for the past year and a half, 2 years. And also thank you, well, I can see that one CEO is here. Thank you, Riaz, for your support, not only to FBC, but the Pacific Media fraternity as a whole. And we know that working together, we will do well. I think, Wendy, this is a start of something that we should look at, continue looking at. And I think the Pacific Media fraternity needs things like this, because we all need to support each other and help each other to get through it. And once again, thank you very much to the panelists, Sincha, Gabriel, Stella, Scotty. Thank you very much for taking out your time to be here. Wendy, thank you very much for organizing this together with Shabana as well. And yeah, so thank you very much. Over to you, Wendy.
Indra, Sincha, Scott, Gabriel, Stella, thank you so much for the most brilliant webinar. Hearing your stories, your personal stories, the logistics stories, stories from around the Pacific has been absolutely fantastic. And Indra, you're right. We need to keep this conversation, this dialogue going. And thank you to everyone. Thank you to our attendees. Thank you for your comments in chat. And we'll get back together soon enough. Thank you so much.